Hi there, and welcome to another episode of African Business Stories, your insight into female innovators and entrepreneurs building and running businesses in Africa. I am Akego Okoye, and on the show today, I will be chatting with Vivian Nwakah, the CEO of Medsaf, a health tech company giving hospitals, pharmacies, and patients access to high-quality medication. In a country where 30% of drugs sold is fake or substandard, this is a big deal. Let's get into it. So you were born and raised in Chicago, I read, and I was just wondering, what did you study in college and what kind of work were you doing before you started your MBA?
Yeah, definitely. So I've always been a fan of just understanding the human psychology, how people think, why they do what they do, but also how that impacts societies. So how do groups of people or societies of people or individuals work together to achieve? That's always been something quite interesting to me. So I went to University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, in the middle of the cornfields, and I was a psychology/sociology major with a minor in African American studies. Okay. Interesting classes on the African family or African American families and et cetera. And those were the types of things that were quite interesting to me. Though the honest truth is I wanted to be a theater major and my parents said no.
Wow.
So more that I'm just, very much in tune to the arts,
Right.
and, just how people think, why they do what they do. And that has probably been the most helpful skill in my entire career.
Right.
Exactly after school, I started working for Wells Fargo Financial in their home mortgage department. So helped Chicagoans purchase homes, refinance homes, and get access to capital to just kind of improve their station, and was very, very good at that. I became like the first Black woman to run a branch in the Midwest at the time.
Wow.
Right before the crash. So, before crash of 2008, I was, thinking that real estate financing was going to be my future, and was happy to live in Chicago and work on that.
Great. So what made you decide to go to business school, and not only that, business school outside of the US?
Yeah. So during the crash, I think the very interesting thing about being in finance at that moment in time, especially in the mortgage industry, is that the year before we were actually seeing the signs of crash, right? So, house values in at half of their historical prices.
Right.
We were seeing that before the media or the greater world even knew that was happening. And for me, that represented the end of the American dream. So somewhere deep in my psyche, I thought to myself, this is the end of what I thought the United States was. At that point, I was inspired to start traveling. Right. So making good money, I would just go, I would backpack, and I got to travel around the world. And that was one of my hobbies. So I'd save up some money, go for a week, go for 2 weeks, go for a weekend around the world. And I actually created a blog about it called Lonely Tripping. Right. And that was just something I was doing on the side. In the meantime, I knew that everything that I thought was going to happen or thought was the path was no longer the path. And I needed to level up my skills and my capabilities. So while I was at Wells Fargo, I basically ran a political campaign in Chicago, in the south side of Chicago, for a Nigerian American candidate. So that was me learning a whole new set of skills that I never thought I'd have. We raised millions of dollars. We raised over $1 million. We were endorsed by the DNC, got access to Obama's software of how they kind of worked on his campaign, got to use that in our campaign, endorsed by AFT,
Right.
Chicago's Teachers Union. So that was an amazing experience. And to be
Hmm.
honest, the way that I got it was just volunteering. Just
Wow.
a guy that I went to school with, he needed volunteers to pass out flyers on his campaign, and I said yes. So after the success of that campaign,
Hmm.
I felt emboldened to do even more.
Wow.
So I helped start home healthcare agencies in Illinois and Indiana. That was a great experience to kind of just introduce me to entrepreneurship. And as that was going,
Hmm.
I knew that I needed more of the basis of business. I
Right.
wanted more of the base, or I thought I needed more of the basis of business.
Okay.
But as I was also traveling around the world, I just couldn't imagine myself sitting in one place. And so I found this
Right.
program where I got to go to Georgia State's J. Mac Robinson Business School, the Federal University of Rio in Brazil, and the Sorbonne in Paris. And so I traveled
Yeah.
around the world in business school with a small cohort, and it changed my life for sure.
Wow. Wow. So as part of the MBA, that's such an interesting story, by the way. So as part of your MBA, you went to Nigeria for 3 months. And I was just wondering why Nigeria? I mean, I figured that your parents are Nigerian, but is there a specific reason why you picked Nigeria to go for your internship?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I had now at this point, I'm a well-traveled traveler. Traveled
Right.
so many places at this point. I've been in China, I've been in Brazil, and these were places that really inspired me. China is an exciting place, or was an exciting place at that moment in time. Brazil at that
Hmm.
moment in time was exciting. It was this idea that these emerging economies could take over the world. And that was the feeling
Right.
being in Shanghai or Beijing or Rio during these times. And of course, I'm Nigerian. But the interesting thing is that my parents left in the 70s and said, we're not going back. So I
Oh,
hadn't been to
wow.
Nigeria yet. But here I am. There was a moment that I was in Bahia in the north of Brazil, and everyone was like, I'm Nigerian. I'm African. In fact, I'm Nigerian. And and you could see that the food and the culture and the religion is all inspired by Nigeria. I saw that with my own eyes.
Hmm.
And seeing these Brazilians walking around saying, I'm Nigerian, it just made me
Hmm.
feel a level of shame that I haven't actually been to Nigeria. So, though I had no job, no clue,
Hmm.
no whatever, I decided that my internship would be in Nigeria, and I landed in Nigeria with nothing. Well, I mean, I had money, but I landed in Nigeria with no job, which was an adventure.
But did you have any relatives in Nigeria? Did you know anybody in Nigeria?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, like I have an uncle that I grew up with. So his
Okay.
family lived half the time in Nigeria, half
Okay.
the time in the US. I had another uncle I'd never met before, and he also lived
Mhm.
half the time in Nigeria and half elsewhere. He owned a like a media company. He was actually one of the first cable companies in Nigeria to broadcast Nollywood movies. So that was
Okay.
really interesting to me. And my other uncle was like head of Motorola Africa or something like that. So
Okay.
I will say I was lucky enough to be able to land in Parkview and,
Right.
actually have a place to live. So I'm not going to pretend that it's just like I randomly was just struggling on the streets.
Sure. Sure. So where did you do your internship?
Well, I think the very interesting thing about Nigeria is I couldn't find a job to save my life. Like I applied to so many places before getting to Nigeria. No feedback, no information. I reached out to people on LinkedIn. And then when I got to Nigeria, I realized that what is up is not the same as what, like this just not the same thing. And that was surprising to me, right? What you think is supposed to be something is just completely different. And so definitely made some mistakes in just who I should have reached out to or talked to, et cetera, at the time. And couldn't find a job, couldn't even get a job in a bank, with all my experience. And what I realized is that Nigeria is definitely run on who you know, and I knew nobody. So other than my uncle. So I actually then just interned for my uncle's cable company. So I'm just going to be honest there that, the connections did come into play, meaning that was how I was able to even just make it worth my while, was to have a connection, but it was very hard.
Interesting. So here you are in Nigeria, in Lagos, and you're interning with your uncle. And I'm sure at the back of your mind, you're waiting for this to be done so you can go back home. But then you have an experience that totally alters the rest of, your time there and indeed, your future. So can you talk to us a little bit about, the experience that led you to decide to actually stay in Nigeria?
Yeah. So, interning with my uncle's company was amazing. Like this is a company that had started before DSTV, before any of these other players. I got to fly around Nigeria, but then also Dubai and see how this company was being run, but also see how Nigerian companies don't scale very easily, right? So was in Port Harcourt and realized like, wow, you've got a ton of people that are just sleeping on their desks that are from the village or something. Are they actually really pushing forward your agenda, or are they just like sleeping on your money and your company? And so my suggestion to my uncle was to fire everybody. I said, fire majority of the people. Let's streamline the operations. And so, I came in with that business school, just kind of of like, let's just scatter this whole place, realign it, efficiency. And he actually fired me.
Oh, wow.
And said, you don't understand Nigeria. And I said, okay, maybe I don't, but so that actually was an interesting thing, because you realize then that the motivations for businesses are not what you learn in business school in emerging markets, right? So that was my first big lesson. But that being said, 2013 in Nigeria was an exciting place to be, and in Nigeria, you get access to people that you would never get access to. I remember seeing George Bush walking around the Echo Hotel. Like, I would never see this guy in the United States, but, so the point is that you just get this access. And I was hungry to learn. I was hungry to meet people. I got connected through family, friends, to a ex oil and gas executive. And as a eager business school, person, I said, you've spent all your career in oil and gas, but, Nigeria doesn't have any power, right? So clearly we should be looking at renewable energy sources and other ways to allow power to get to the masses. And to my surprise, he said, well, then just build it then. And so, he was my first business partner. And it was just literally that easy, of just saying like, look, let's explore some new options of how to get power to the people. And here's an opportunity for me to leverage his contacts and his network to build my own solar company. I'm not an engineer. I have no clue, but I'm going to figure it out. And so it's that type of experience that it's just almost impossible in the United States, I think. It's that type of experience that made me say, my ticket is supposed to leave. I'm supposed to leave this country. I've got to figure out a way to stay. Right. And so in that time, though, one of the friends that I had made that was taking me around and showing me Nigeria, which I was, so interested in learning about, he actually passed away from taking a fake medication. And that opened my eyes to this idea that people are living in Nigeria with this concept that they may or may not get a real medication if they go to the pharmacy or the doctor. And that was just something that everybody knew and was resigned to. And so that stuck with me in the back of my head as I was trying to figure out what my path was. That that's not fair, that he was a great person, didn't deserve that, and that if he had lived in the US like his other family members, he would be alive today.
Right.
And so what is the value of life in a Nigerian context, in an African context? Why are Nigerians less of people that they don't deserve to live? And so those were some of the themes that were in the back of my head as I was navigating Nigeria through the business perspective.
So as you're having that thought process and trying to build up a viable business case around it, you set up a company called Vitamins NG. What was that about?
Yeah, so the concept of Medsaf. So Medsaf is a platform to help healthcare stakeholders purchase, manage, and track medications. That was always the original concept.
Okay.
But thought was, well, how are you going to get people who are used to going to the market and touching and feeling something? How do you get them to purchase online? Right. And so I was inspired by, I had embedded myself within the tech community and was inspired by the Kongas, the Jumias, the other tech companies, e-commerce companies that were rising at the same time and showing us that potentially people could do things completely different than they've done in the past using technology. And so that was a very inspirational time for me to be in Nigeria. Now, I'm not a doctor or a pharmacist, so I have to figure out, okay, well, what do I actually have access to as a healthcare entrepreneur from the United States? What do I have access to that can help me, start to understand or learn a little bit more about this market so that I can create a viable product? So as I have home healthcare agencies in the US, I know that using those types of connections from a US perspective, that I can get access to medications with a doctor or pharmacist, but by myself, I can definitely easily get vitamins and supplements, right? That was where vitamins.ng came from, which is just, okay, what can I put up now to kind of test the probability that someone that's never seen you, never heard of you, will go on your website, purchase something, and actually consume it. So that was a test of the market itself. What does it take to actually get a vitamin or supplement from your warehouse directly to the person? So that's where I tested out logistics and logistic partnerships, Facebook, Instagram marketing, as well as just some of the operational processes that need to be in place to get someone their product within a couple of days. And so that was a great experiment to understand how to build the greater Medsaf concept at that point in time with the team that I had, because I didn't have a team. It was just me at that point in time.
So what does Medsaf mean?
So Medsaf is Meds Africa, Meds Safe, and it's a play on that, right? Medsaf is all about the fact that quality medication is a fundamental human right, and that's what we stand for. And so in that means that safe and quality medications should be available to the end consumer, the patient. And so I did a deep analysis of the supply chain to figure out where's the weaknesses. How is it that a medication can come from Pfizer, Sanofi, or Merck and then end up being compromised? And so it was within that, deep dive research while I'm doing other things that I found some of the weaknesses within the chain. And so Medsaf was built to support those weaknesses within the supply chain in the context of a Nigeria, but also other emerging markets, so that the end result would be that regardless of what the motivation is doctor or procurement pharmacist or, hospital pharmacy or pharmacy itself is dispensing quality and safe medication.
Interesting. So your clients are the pharmacies and hospitals.
At this point, our clients are, but we do actually, especially in this COVID-19 reality, we've expanded even to direct to customer or direct to consumer sales. So right now at Medsaf, we mostly sell to hospitals and pharmacies, majority hospitals, but we now also sell directly to patients as well.
That's interesting. That was one of I was going to come to that question. We might as well just talk about it now. I was going to ask about the impact of COVID on your business model, and on your clients. So basically, because of COVID, you've had to change your business model slightly. That's what you're saying, right?
Well, so the reality of Medsaf is that we were a bit before our time. Back in 2016, 17, the average hospital or pharmacy did not see the need to go onto a website and purchase medications. That was just not in the DNA or that's just not in their thought process.
Right.
Our biggest competitor is the open drug market, which is where you can go, touch the medications, feel them, and put them in your bag and then take them out, right? So that's what we were up against. How do you get older people who've done something a certain way for most of their life to change their habit using technology? That was an extreme hurdle that we had to overcome at the time. So we were actually perfectly suited for COVID-19 because now supply chains have been disrupted. People can't leave. They now want to find another way to get their medications. And we've spent, at this point, 3 years teaching our clients that they can go on our platform and actually purchase their medications and get everything that they need. So we were perfectly aligned and suited for COVID-19. I think what the other point of what we've done over the last 3 years is actually build a brand that means quality. And so because we'd focused so much on building a brand, people knew about it. And so we started to get many requests to supply PPE, but also medications, which just forced us to expand into that type of category faster than we would have without COVID-19. So I wouldn't say that we've changed any business model or changed any. It's more that we've been forced to speed up our timelines on certain pieces of our business faster than we would have previously, if it wasn't for COVID.
Thanks for explaining that. So just to understand how Medsaf works. So basically for the pharmacies and the hospitals, they go online and do they buy medication wholesale? Do they get a discount for buying it from you as opposed to the open market? I know that the benefits of authentic drugs is a big deal, but I imagine that price is also another issue. So how does it actually work, and what benefit do you bring to the hospitals and pharmacies?
So it's really just about there's two ends of the supply chain that have trouble, right? So there's hospitals and pharmacies who have to purchase thousands of different types of SKUs from different types of manufacturers from not only within Nigeria, but globally. 7% of all medications sold in Nigeria are imported due to, other challenges just as local manufacturing we all know local manufacturing is a challenge. So for all of the different issues or medical issues that a Nigerian would have to deal with, there just isn't enough local manufacturing to cover those needs. So importation is huge here. There's a massive black market as well due to restrictions from a government perspective of importation, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of issues, lots of issues. On the manufacturer's side, having transparency on where their medications are going and gaining insights from that is also a huge issue. And and just because of places like the open drug market, which is like a black box, right? So you've got two sides of a supply chain that aren't able to easily reach each other in an economical way, right? So Medsaf is the in-between platform that helps these manufacturer medications get sent directly to the hospital, and we accommodate for some of the economical reasons why these two players have trouble reaching each other. So from a hospital pharmacy perspective, they've got to figure out how to get all their needs in a cost-effective way because price is extremely important. As we know, insurance is only 1% of the population have insurance. Everything is cash and carry. Everybody is very price sensitive. So they've got to get the cheapest medication that they can. Therein lies some of the issues that we see from a medication perspective. So in our platform, we're the aggregator. We're already aggregating all of the different needs for this one pharmacy, but spread that out across hundreds of pharmacies and hospitals. And then you start to have economics that makes sense for the hospital, but also for the manufacturer to drop their price and work with you a bit further. So it was just about, getting the type of scale that's necessary to beat the open drug market prices and make sure that the medications can get to the hospitals and pharmacies. On the back end, we are doing quality control as a service. Another layer of what we do, quality control, demand planning. We're using the data that we get to make it easier, faster to get those medications directly to the hospital or pharmacy, therefore lowering the bar to work with Medsaf, all the while building a brand that is strengthening daily. That means quality and cost-effective medication that people can trust, which then allows hospitals and pharmacies to start to trust us for more and more of their medication needs, versus all of these other sources. So that, in a nutshell, is how Medsaf works.
So what has the uptake been like in Nigeria?
Yeah, so we have over 400. We have over 400 different institutions, entities that work with Medsaf. During lockdown, we've scaled to Abuja. Now we've just shipped to Jos, which is our first time. Port Harcourt. So we're now moving, even without having to set up in other cities, as we've been in Lagos this whole time. So
So in a lot of the conversations that I have, there are two things that kind of run through all these conversations: access to capital and scaling. And if you could speak to how you were able to raise capital. I know that you did have some angel investors in the beginning. Just how you were able to raise capital in the beginning, what it did for you as a startup, and how that is going to help you to scale. I mean, you've already started to do that, but just wondering what your plans are going forward.
So I had a strategy that may or may not have been the easiest strategy, and that was to raise money from people who I admired for their business acumen worldwide.
Right.
So I didn't go to family and friends to raise money. I went to business leaders. So for example, an example is Bastian Gotter, of one of the founders of Iroko TV, right? At that time, they were the largest tech company to ever make it in Nigeria, in a Nigerian context, right? So I wanted that type of investor.
Right.
I had investors from Silicon Valley, from New York, from Nigeria, oil and gas. I had my old boss, invest, basically just bringing people together that are successful in their own right and can now give me some type of guidance as I'm navigating this world of raising money and scaling this company in such a hard environment. So that was extremely important to me, to do it that way. Right. And it has not been the best way. I mean, because it took a long time, right? So, I had started working on this in 2014.
Mm.
So by the time it was 2016 and I was actually ready to actually start raising money, a lot of those conversations took quite a while to close,
Right.
uh, was great, right? Because it's then teaching me how to, be a better fundraiser in the context of something that's so close to me and in my head. So I had to get out of my head and figure out how to sell
Mm.
this company in order to gain money. So to date, we've raised about $1.4 million. I was that the later $1 million was much easier to raise than the earlier 320 that we
Hmm.
that was the hardest part. Now it's all about just getting the right investors to get us
Right.
to the next level. So I'm all about just trying to figure out um, how to level up, and who needs to help us get to that next level. Medsaf wants to be the platform for all pharmaceutical
Hmm.
transactions worldwide. So we've got a goal on the level of a Facebook or Amazon. So how do we get there? That means that we've got a long road ahead of us, and a lot of people need to be involved to help us get successful.
That's awesome. So, what have you learned about yourself over this 4 year period? It's 4 years, right?
Yeah. I've had to like really just kind of come out and just become this, you know, person that just executes, you know, and before as I was traveling, I was very whimsical and just very, just kind of flighty in just how I looked at doing things and the world. And I always looked at everybody in a very
Right.
positive light. I would say I've definitely become a bit more Nigerian in just how I analyze people up front. I'm definitely more discerning and just more, maybe a bit harder, right? Like, so this place made me much harder than I ever really was growing up in Chicago, yeah, in the suburbs, right? So, so this place
Mm.
has hardened me in the right way, though, in the way that,
Right.
no one can really take advantage of me in the way that they would have maybe when I was much younger,
Mm.
as I was quite naive and just kind of very open minded to everybody,
Right.
right? Whereas in Nigeria, it just kind of makes you a bit more closed um, naturally,
Right.
and I definitely have changed in that way, which I'm not going to say if it's good or bad, right? But as far as the company and the impact of building Medsaf on me, I mean, I think that for a life lesson, I mean, this is probably
Mm.
one of the greatest life lessons that um, I'll ever have, right? So it just more so reinforced things that I knew about myself. I knew that I could be a high achiever. I knew that I could create things out of nothing. I knew that I can, do great things. And Medsaf is just a manifestation of all the things that I thought to myself when nobody else believed in me. So I don't necessarily think of Medsaf as
Mm.
changing me. It's more that
Mm.
it's just the manifestation of what I wanted to achieve in this world and the legacy that I
Right.
wanted to leave behind, even when I had no credentials or no
Mm.
thought of even how to achieve that, if that makes sense.
It does. And just wondering, what has it been like being a woman building a business, a young woman building a business in Nigeria?
Yeah, so I mean that was always a worry and that was also my worry. I'm not going to lie about it. I mean, and so for me, the biggest thing for me is that I can't be bought. I can't be anybody's slave. And I've
Mm.
always been like that. I think my parents would always complain of just how stubborn I was, as a child. It's just I forged my own path. I've always been a leader. And so when I came here,
Mm.
I was always told these stories of just, how hard it is for women. And I said, look, what if I
Right.
can stay true to myself as I've stayed true to myself and and taught myself how strong I am as I've traveled by myself around the world. What if I take those, qualities and lessons that I learned, basically building the grit, the resilience that I need to have in order to tackle this country? What if I took all those lessons and applied them here to protect myself, but also be in front of, and also just to succeed, right? So yeah, I mean, I think by being very strong in your own value system internally, I knew that I could overcome those challenges. It would be harder, right? It would be harder, but I would be smarter. And so for me, it was more about having that in the back of my head in everything that I did. How am I going to outsmart them? So you think you're going to have a meeting with me because I'm pretty great. Let me show you what that looks like.
Right.
Show you what that looks like.
Right.
Let me put you in your place to show you what that looks like. And then let me wow you so much that you even forgot that was your goal. And now you just want to help Medsaf because you believe in it. Right. And I just honed those skills here in Nigeria. And it's been fun, right? Because I've never had any bad experience. In fact, we took everything that is great about being a woman and applied it into our business. So you take your strengths and just make it even stronger. And who cares about what other people think? And so that was just kind of my mentality.
That is just awesome. That is such an awesome perspective. So what's next for Vivian?
So I think after Medsaf, I'll join the board. They can continue it. I'll finally have my children and family, and I'll probably write books. Get back into my creative side. Like that. You can see bursts of it through Medsaf's journey. In that I'm the strategist, I'm the creator. I'm kind of pushing that energy into Medsaf, but it's not fully realized in this business sense, right? Or in this business aspect. Yeah. So I'll probably push more into that, I recently reread The Alchemist, and I remembered that book, one of the books that inspired me to start traveling around the world. I want to write a book that inspires people to do incredible things in their life, and I think that this Medsaf journey is just a couple chapters, maybe a longer chapters than I thought, in this life that will allow me to share with others. And so that's pretty much where I'm at right now, is how can I get to that point where I can kind of just share and inspire and push others to reach their self-actualization, psychology, and be happy with their legacies, and I think that would probably be a little bit more of my future.
That's great. That's absolutely great. Thank you so much, Vivian. Thank you. That was an excellent conversation.
Thank you.
That was Vivian Nwakah, CEO of Medsaf. According to research, Africa is the most affected region when it comes to counterfeit drugs, and it is estimated that about 116,000 extra people die due to counterfeit malaria drugs alone. Medsaf is a welcome solution in Africa's healthcare space. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you're not yet subscribed to our podcast, please go ahead and do so. We also welcome you to leave us a review so we know how we're doing. I'm Okego Okoye, and you have been listening to African Business Stories.